If you're an ambitious person who dreams of being super successful, it's natural to look at those who've already made it and ask, how did they do it? Was it incredible talent, focus, hard work? What techniques, what strategies did they use that I could steal? Now, it's the same whether you talk about property investing, business success, entrepreneurship. There's only one problem with that approach, according to some fascinating new science highlighted by the MIT Technology Review, and also by a handful of honest investors and entrepreneurs I've been speaking to. And what they would say is luck always plays a way bigger role in success than most of us would acknowledge. So if you try and follow the path of your role models without acknowledging the fact that luck played a big part, you're likely to run into some very serious problems. So in today's podcast, I'm going to be joined by my business partner and founder of Business Accelerator Mastermind, Mark Creedon, as we discuss the importance of luck in your success. So whether you're a business owner, a professional entrepreneur, or a property investor, I'm sure you're going to get some benefit from our chat. So welcome to today's show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment, and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect, and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now, here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
I recently read an article by MIT which highlighted something I guess I already knew. Success isn't evenly spread through the population. In fact, its distribution follows a pattern where a tiny number of people end up with the vast majority of money, or a small group of business owners significantly do better, more successful than the rest. Or look, whatever other market or material of success you're looking at, basically, it's the Pareto Principle, isn't it? Like many things in life, the 80-20 rule. But if you think about it, it's a little unusual because talent and intelligence are spread much more evenly through the population. So why are some people more successful than others? Does luck really have a role to play in this? That's really what I want to chat today about with my business partner and founder of Business Accelerator Mastermind, Mark Creedon. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Michael. Michael, I was fascinated in the article when you pointed out to me where scientists found that success is mostly a matter of luck. And in particular, Michael, where they said it is evident that the most successful individuals are also the luckiest ones. And then the less successful individuals are also the unluckiest ones. So talent and effort matter, but pure chance seems to matter a whole lot more.
That's interesting, isn't it? That's a fascinating result. But it wouldn't come as a shock to a number of the successful entrepreneurs and business people you deal with at Business Accelerator Mastermind, and to be blunt, similarly with many of the successful property investors I deal with.
No, that's right. We see it a lot, and you and I have met lots of successful, lucky people and unsuccessful, unlucky people, I suppose, over time. But I think something that really sort of struck a chord for me, Michael, was a comment that was left on the Property Update website recently in relation to a blog by Tom Corley. And I think it's probably a good reflection of perhaps how the average person thinks. And I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Marta made this comment, Michael. She said, "Hi, I didn't read Tom Corley's book yet. It's on my list. But I'm wondering if the sample of rich people is somewhat biased."
Maybe I should say this explained the concept that most rich people were actually self-made millionaires. That's one of the results of his study.
Yes. And so she went on to say, it's possible that statistically there are many more rich people who inherited their money, but A, they didn't want to talk about it since they know people hate them for it, or they were just not interested in the interview, or B, Tom Corley didn't reach them to prove his point. She goes on to say, same with his other findings, maybe, and I don't know the data, but there are many more unhappy rich people or who never gave any money to charity, but it's just not the thing you want to talk about, even if it's anonymous. So I'm trying not to be pessimistic, but what I want to say that it might be that the reality is quite different from what Tom Corley is trying to tell us. Michael, what would you say to Marta?
Isn't that a fascinating comment? And it's nice of her to take the time and leave the comment. But I guess the first thing I'd say to Marta is, read Tom's book and then also read my book with Tom, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, because it's not only our finding, but lots of other studies have shown that most millionaires today are self-made millionaires. But there's a number of unwealthy thoughts in the comments that Marta had made. But I agree that that's probably the way a lot of people think, because one of the biggest differences between the wealthy people and the average Australian or average person around the world really, Mark, is the way they think. Of course, that's not the way millionaires would think or believe. But I think a lot of people somehow or other think that rich people are lucky or inherited money, Mark.
Yeah, I think that's very true, Michael.
That's really why there's a big chasm between the rich and the poor. It's really, in my mind, got a lot to do with the way they're thinking. I remember being interviewed not that long ago by somebody in the media who was wanting to say, well, what's the secret of successful property investors? Is it their knowledge? Is it their time in the market? Is it their experience? Is it their team? And I think I disappointed him when I said it actually has a lot more to do with the way they think than any of those other things. But of course, that can be changed. And so, Marta, I would suggest that you start by reading our book, which may bring you some factual evidence to understand why you should change your thinking. Because the biggest thing that holds a lot of people back in the countries where a lot of people are listening to this podcast, where in general wealth is available to most people, is the way they think. I've had the fortune of doing a lot of traveling in the world, Mark. You know, Pam and I used to, when we could, do a lot of traveling. And I've been to a lot of very poor countries, very underdeveloped countries, where it really is hard to get up the rungs of wealth because of corruption, personal corruption, government corruption. But in Australia and in New Zealand and in a lot of places where this is listened to, this podcast listened to, I actually think the opportunities are there. So what's holding most people back from becoming rich is their thinking. And we've explained that pretty well in Rich Habits, Poor Habits. Your thoughts lead to your feelings. Your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions lead to your result. So, Mark, in my mind, the outside world is really a direct reflection of what's happening inside your head.
It's interesting, Michael, because I know people will come to you and in relation to just general success and property, and they're often asking the question, Michael, what's the secret? What's that one little, silver bullet, that one little secret that you can run with? But in fact, if you think about it, where you are financially today in all areas of life is really related to the things that you've chosen to do and the things you've chosen not to do, Michael.
Yes, chosen not to do is really just as important, isn't it? I believe that we're all driving around with one foot on the accelerator and another on the brake. In other words, we've got rich habits, we've got empowering habits, and we've also got poor thoughts, disempowering thoughts, negative thoughts. So the first thing, of course, is to recognize this, because everyone hopes and thinks they're rational. So it's just the way you think about it. And so therefore, most people don't recognize it. So first thing is to recognize it, because a lot of what you do all day, every day is repetitive, Mark. It's subconscious. It's related to the programming, the things that you heard, things you saw, things you experienced as a child. And most of us haven't changed that programming that we got a long time ago. And I bet you're seeing much the same in the way business people and entrepreneurs think.
Well, we are. We're seeing exactly the same thing. And I guess the other thing too, Michael, is that change doesn't come about just because I wish it did. So there's actually work that needs to go into bringing about those change and changing the way we were thinking. You were saying to me just the other day that I was amazed that Psychology Today said that the average person has some 50,000 thoughts a day.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It's
yes. But they also found in the study that they were doing that the rich think very differently to the way the poor people think. Maybe we could go through a couple of those things. See, in general, I think the rich, now again, this isn't a judge of people. So when we talk about rich or poor, I think we're talking about material things here, Mark. And we know having a big property portfolio or a successful business or a large share portfolio isn't the only way. And it's actually probably a very poor way of judging wealth or judging how successful people are. But if we're talking materially in this particular discussion, we found that rich are positive thinkers. In fact, in Tom Corley's study, Rich Habits study, 67% of the self-made millionaires forged the habit of being positive and upbeat. But that's an interesting wording from Tom. They forged a habit. They actually didn't always come naturally, and he found that a positive mental outlook is critical to overcoming the problems, the obstacles, the pitfalls, the mistakes, the failures you have. Staying positive is a critical component to becoming wealthy. So your positivity in your radar, your reticular activating system looks for solutions, the richer positive thinkers, they look for opportunities where others, they tend to only see negative things wherever they look.
Yeah, they do. And I guess that's why they stay where they are. A really interesting point is that they forged those habits, and something we talk about, success in life, success in your business, success in property portfolios. It doesn't come just from wishing it, Michael, does it?
No, it doesn't. So we can talk a bit about how you create these habits, but I guess this is off the topic that we said about luck, but we are going to come to a conclusion. So for those listening to you and me rambling about this, I think it's worth staying with us, because what we're saying is that you are in control of your life. As I said, your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions lead to results. So if we can change the way you think, we can change the outside world. The outside world is a reflection of what's going on. So while the richer positive thinkers, this study that was written up in Psychology Today that you mentioned, found that the poor are negative thinkers. 70% of the thoughts of the average person, apparently, are negative. But Mark, that's sort of ingrained, isn't it? It's protective in some ways.
Well, it is. And I guess if you go back to that comment before, that the average person has 50,000 thoughts, and as you said, Michael, the listener can stick with us. We're not going to work through our collective 100,000 thoughts in this session, but imagine if 70% of those 50,000 thoughts in a day had a negative feel to them, or a negative connotation attached to them.
And if that's the case, how do you overcome the obstacles, the pitfalls, the mistakes, the problems? Now, of course, it's not helped by social media, is it, Mark? It's not helped by the media in general.
Well, it's not. I mean, I don't remember the last time I saw anything on social media about somebody having a bad day, or somebody failing, or, the investment that went wrong, or the advice that was bad. What's the saying that you often say, Michael? It's about what you see is simply the highlight reel, and you never see what's on the cutting room floor.
So therefore you judge yourself against other people. But the media loves giving us bad news about the property market going to crash or businesses going broke. So those who have negative thoughts, they let the opportunities pass them by, and they're not looking for opportunities. They're too focused on negative consequences. Mark, I know that you often speak to people as part of Business Accelerator Mastermind about their reticular activating system and what they look for. And I heard you talk about the example of wanting to buy a white Toyota and what you find. Maybe you could just share that with us.
Yeah, it's interesting. Once you make that decision that you're going to buy a new car, then if you decide you're going to buy a white Toyota, suddenly that's all you see on the road. Is you see so many white Toyotas. They've always been there. But I guess the other thing, Michael, I remember you saying to me many, many years ago when we first met, you were telling me the story about driving along with, I don't know if it was Harrison.
It was Harrison.
Harrison,
yeah. You're a good memory.
And you said to me, Harrison said, look at all the white Toyotas on the road, Dad. And your answer was, look at all the white Mercedes-Benz on the road, Harrison.
That's right. So it's what you look for, isn't it?
100%.
So that's part of the reason you shouldn't be a negative thinker, because you'll find negativity, and it is out there. You'll find things that don't work because they are out there, compared to being a positive thinker. Now, again, when this study looked at the difference between successful people and the average person, they also found that the rich people, and they classed rich as successful, 91% of the rich in their study were decision makers. They forged the habit of making decisions. That was critical to success. Interesting wording. Again, those who developed the habit of making decisions, they're sought after as leaders by others. They make good bosses. How have you found that amongst the clients that you're working with, Mark?
Well, one of the things that we see is that how people become an employer of choice, how they grow a team of the right people around them, is people look for leadership. So nobody wants to work with or for someone who's got one leg each side of the fence and complaining that it's uncomfortable. They're looking for people who are prepared to make decisions, move forward. And, Michael, sometimes they're not the right decisions, and sometimes that there's some consequences that are unintended, but they've made the decision and they move. Again, this positive thinking, they move forward, they forge forward onto the next stage.
Interestingly, they've also forged the habit of overcoming their fears of making a decision. Because how often have you seen people, we see it with investment all the time, who have got paralysis of analysis? They just can't make a decision. The rich don't overthink, which I guess in many ways is really a form of procrastination.
Well, it is. I mean, it's impossible to know everything you need to know before making a decision. If we went about looking to know everything there was to know, it would take us years take me years to decide what breakfast to have. So,
good point.
There's so many cereals on the shelf.
That's true. So I guess what you've got to do is become uncomfortable with being uncomfortable about making decisions. You've got to make a decision knowing you know enough at the moment, and then you're going to move forward getting the knowledge. Now, there's an example that actually came across my desk today. At Metropole, we start off with our clients by delivering a plan for helping them develop the financial independence that they require. And we deliver hundreds every year, and 98% of our clients are very happy because it shows them what's possible, what's likely, what's realistic, what isn't. But the gentleman who emailed me today, and we're going to help him, he happens to be an architect. And he's very good at his profession, but he's disappointed in the plan that Kate and the team wrote, even though I was very impressed and it was very detailed, because it didn't step out step by step exactly what has to happen in 10 to 15 years' time when he plans to retire. Now, I guess in his mind as an architect, if you do a plan, if you do a blueprint, you've got to finish it before you start your building, because otherwise it's going to fall over. But as a business owner, as a professional, as a property investor, you've got to understand the things that you've got to get right, the foundations, and then other things. It's too dependent upon, well, in his case, I don't know what interest rates are going to be in 10 years' time. I don't know if the government's going to allow him to negatively gear. I don't know if he's going to be able to access his superannuation or the government's going to make it later. So what one has to do, though, is start with a plan, because if you don't have a plan, when things go wrong, when the media gets your attention, you're going to be driven by emotions rather than by logic and evidence. So you start with a plan, but you're prepared to change it along the way, which is in fact what we're going to end up doing, because we regularly review our clients and update things.
Yeah, and I guess there's that old saying, Michael, a fail to plan is a plan to fail. But if we were to look at, and probably, Michael, when you first started in business, for example, the thought was you had to have a 20-year plan or a 15 or 25-year plan. I mean, it's just impossible to plan that far ahead. So a good, solid foundation, and then to adjust it as it goes.
You're right, Mark. And look, when I first started, I learned the concept of having a business plan. And even if it wasn't for 20 years ahead, it was actually, you had to have this documented plan. I bought a program that set it out. I don't think I ever even completed it. It was too complicated. How often do you come across that with people that you deal with in business?
Oh, the number of people who I first speak to, and they sort of, I ask them if they've got a business plan in there, and says, sure, it's about 50 pages long, and we had somebody help us do it, or we spent hours and hours and hours doing it together, and we haven't looked at it for a couple of years. It's too complicated, it's too long, it's too involved, and it doesn't really give them the opportunity to, at a glance, go, right, what do I need to do next in order to achieve my stated objectives?
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I know the answer to, because we're business partners in Business Accelerator Mastermind, and you've helped me as my business coach as well. But for business people, now not investors, the investors, we do very detailed plans, but again, we move them along as the world changes. What do you recommend for clients of yours who are business people?
Michael, very simple. If their plan is any more than one page, it's way too long. So we have a really nice one-page plan, which is broken into 4 very simple quadrants. It looks at where they want to be in 3 years' time. What are their goals in the next 12 months? What do they need to work on in the next 90 days? And then what are they going to do tomorrow? And they all fit very much hand in glove. If we get that right in that right sequence, it's a map at a glance, and it works really, really well.
Sure. So I was starting to say that rich are decision makers, Mark.
Yeah, I guess the converse of that, Michael, is that the poor tend to let others make decisions, don't they?
That's right. The majority of the people in this study, 98% of them, in fact, in the study we're quoting, were not decision makers. They succumbed to the fear of making a decision. They were scared to make a decision. They got lost in analysis. They were overthinking, which again is a form of procrastination, as we said. The poor feel uncomfortable about making decisions. They defer to others. So if you don't have a plan for yourself, you're going to be part of somebody else's, your boss's plan. I can't even imagine what plans he's got for you.
Michael, let's sort of bring this together, because I understand why Marta asked the question she did, and I think lots of people that you and I have both come across think similarly. But I also think that the rich are just lucky, and it's only luck that made them rich. What would you say to that?
Mark, I agree. Many of those who've been unsuccessful at life, who haven't actually achieved what they wanted financially or in other areas, they tend to believe that the wealthy successful property investors got lucky, or that business people got lucky because they were there at the right time. With property investors, they say they've entered the market when prices were cheaper or finance was easier, or maybe the market did the hard work for them. I guess that's because it makes them feel better to think that must have been an outside factor that made the others rich, rather than something that these successful investors did themselves. Interestingly, I found successful investors also believe they're lucky. However, they believe that they created their own good luck. They believe they created their own destiny by being the pilots of their life, not just a passenger being dragged along for a ride. So in my mind, Mark, you need the right mindset to be lucky.
Yeah, Michael, you absolutely do. I guess the other thing, though, is that it's not just the right mindset, but luck kind of finds positive people, doesn't it? I mean, people who seek out opportunities, luck finds them, doesn't it?
Finds the persistent people as well, Mark. All successful investors, business people, entrepreneurs, they've failed. We've spoken about that in previous chats. They've failed more often than unsuccessful people have, but they've just got up one more time. They became successful by failing. They survived until they eventually became lucky. They eventually thrived. What this shows me is that success is a process, and a big part of that process is persistence. Mark, you never get lucky if you quit, do you? However, you get lucky when you're persistent. Luck's the reward, the payment for being persistent.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, the fact is that those who try the hardest are the luckiest. In fact, Michael, I was having this conversation with my nephew the other day, and he said to me, it's all right for you. You were lucky. You bought your first house for $45,000. And I said to him, yes, I did. And I paid 17% interest, and I was earning $5,000 a year. So it's you can look back and just think that it's all about luck. But again, they were decisions I chose to make. I took risks. I worked hard, made decisions. So it's a really interesting thing that those who try the hardest actually become the luckiest.
Yeah, or more accurately, I think those who never stopped trying to succeed, those who persisted, eventually created their good luck. So I guess my message to Marta, to finish all that bit off, is don't quit on your dream. By the way, you've got to start with a dream. Luck doesn't visit quitters, but obviously it's much more than that, Mark. Sure, investment requires luck, but luck requires work. There's an element of luck. It's the precursor to success. In order for luck to occur to you, you must relentlessly develop your skills, develop your abilities. I mean, if you're talking about investment, you've got to invest your time and energy. I think firstly in yourself, in your personal development, in perfecting some skills, in getting some knowledge. You must become an expert in something. But you'd notice that be much the same with businesses, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely it is. I mean, you have to become an expert in something, and to become lucky, if we're using that term as a business owner, you have to understand, some of the really simple things. Michael, I don't know a successful business owner that doesn't know their numbers. You've got to know your basic numbers. So there's things that you actually have to study. You can't just, open the doors or open the online shop and wish for a bit of luck and all the success comes your way. It's exactly the same, is it not, in property investment?
Oh, look, very much so. So property investor, to be successful, you actually got to understand a lot more than just property, because property is just the vehicle to create wealth. So you've got to understand the macroeconomic factors that drive our markets, as well as the regional factors, the local drivers. You've got to have a good handle on what's happening to the economy, how the world of tax, finance, the law relate to it. But there's actually a lot more you've got to understand about how the property cycle works. So what holds many investors back from success is gaining these skills takes time and comes with experience, and I guess along the way with mistakes. I guess I've often said you've got to have invested through a couple of cycles to be a successful property investor. So you've got to become an expert. And when you are, opportunities are going to present themselves because you're going to know what to look for. You're going to be ready to pounce. But of course, there's another way of shortcutting that 15, 20 years of experience, Mark, and that's to get a mentor in your business or a property strategist or a mentor. But a lot of people call themselves mentors in the property space when really that's just cloaking themselves for being property marketers or salespeople.
Yeah, it's very true. You just mentioned needing to get your head around finance, tax, and the law. It sounds like a great topic for a book, Michael.
Yeah,
title.
That was a good title for a book, and the one I've written that's done very well over the time. So I guess what we're saying is if you're not prepared when opportunity comes your way, then an opportunity is going to pass you by. And it probably is worth just reinforcing what I said a moment ago, because you can either try and do it yourself, which is, to be blunt, what I did for the first 15, 20 years of my life. And I guess it was an element of ego. Had to do it myself, had to prove it. I think another one was it was actually much harder in those days. There weren't property strategists around. There weren't the books. There weren't the podcasts. There weren't the blogs. But the trouble today is everyone's out there saying, I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to be a mentor. Hey, by the way, I've got the secret on how to find the latest hotspot, or how to beat the market, or buy cryptocurrency, or in business, we've got the follow this 5-step blueprint and you'll be an overnight success on eBay or on Amazon.
Yeah, a good mate of mine says it took him 25 years to become an overnight success. And Michael, let's talk about the traits of successful investors, though.
Okay. Well, I mean, one is that they're lucky. You're right. Sure that those who reach the top have set themselves up to be lucky, but they've done that because I think, first of all, they started with some long-term goals. They plan to become the people they plan to become. They bring their future into the present so they can do something about it now, rather than just hoping it's going to turn out right. And so while some people will plan, if they're not sure how to or what to, that's what our team at Metropole does, where we start by putting a strategic property plan together. And that outlines the opportunities, the risks. It helps improve their situation. So the first thing is successful investors set long-term goals. But I guess if we're talking about investment, it's the same in other areas of life, Mark.
Oh, it is. And it's exactly the same in business. I mean, even when we were talking before about that one-page plan concept, we talk about what are the long-term goals. If we're having this conversation in 3 years' time, where would the business be? And you've got to have, Michael, the analogy I always use is if you were going to plan a road trip in a car, you would start with a plan of where you wanted to end up. What was your destination? Otherwise, you're just going to keep turning left and drive around in circles. So
good point.
Having that really clear long-term goal set, I think, is vitally important. But there's more to it than that, isn't there?
Well, sure. Okay. The other big thing is delayed gratification. Successful investors have actually learned to spend less than they earn, so they can save, so they can invest. They save the difference, meaning they're going to have lots of money to spend in the future. They've learned that if they have an easy life now, they're going to have a harder time in the future. If they have a harder time now, they're going to have a better life and more options in the future.
Yeah, there's a price to pay, isn't there? And it's just a question of when you pay it.
Hey, that's a very good way of thinking about it. I think successful investors also understand the importance of capital growth of their assets. They recognise they've got to actually build a large asset base. So while cash flow keeps them in the game, it's capital growth that'll get them out of the rat race. And that's why they only buy the sort of properties that deliver strong capital growth. But they're also continuously studying the markets, and they're relentless optimists. I think that comes back to what we said before. They don't get scared by the property pessimists that are out there, because there's continual news for as long as I've been investing. Well, maybe not, because there wasn't the internet then, but people are continuously for the last 20 years warning about the boogeyman around the corner that's going to crash the property markets. Now, they're risk averse. They know the difference between speculating and investing. So while a lot of people are out there looking for the next hotspot or the best tax investments, the successful people I've come across, the successful investors, they use a time-tested strategy, one that's known, proven and trusted, that allows them to say no to more opportunities than they say yes to.
Yeah, and Michael, it's very true in business as well. I mean, there are some very simple philosophies and very simple strategies you can put in place, and those sorts of people who we see not having great success in business are the same in property investment. They're looking for the trick, the quick success, the secret.
Well, property investment is a business. I think that's a really good analogy, because you've got to treat it like a business. So you don't do it for fun. A lot of people enjoy the searching on the weekend and going and inspecting properties, but they don't know the numbers. They haven't got a plan. They don't treat it like a business. They don't make the objective evidence-based decisions. But I guess that's one of the traits of successful people. They are decisive. So while they're not in a hurry to find a good investment property, when one arrives, when luck smiles on them, back to the analogy we used before, they're in a hurry to secure it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that they do different to the average person is they specialise rather than diversify. I know a lot of people say you should diversify, don't have all your eggs in one basket. But look, I've got a very, very substantial property portfolio. And in Melbourne, it's interestingly, 4 municipalities, or my residential one is, my commercial properties are in different municipalities. But why would I stray from those areas that have always worked really, really well? So I've got a diversification in townhouses, filly units, houses. I've got diversification in commercial and industrial properties, but I actually specialise in an area that I know well. And I guess, as we said, one of the big differences between successful investors and the average is they're financially accountable. They regularly review their property's performance because they treat it like a business.
Yeah, and that's very important. I guess a big part about treating it like a business too, Michael, then is sort of getting the right team around them. One of the things that we always work with people very early on as a part of Business Accelerator Mastermind is getting to understand who their team is that they need around them and what their roles are. And it's the same for property, isn't it?
Well, it's too hard to do on your own. It's too complicated an area today to do that. So they're prepared to pay for their team. The most expensive advice is the cheap advice, the free advice you get on the internet that's wrong. So one of the interesting things I've found is all the successful property investors that we deal with and the multi-millionaires, they pay for a team of advisors, while the average Australian, they get their advice for free on the internet. Much the same with business.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, Michael, since I've known you, it's always amazed me if I end up at a barbecue or something, there's 20 people, there's 20 property experts and there's 20 business experts at every barbecue on every Saturday afternoon around Australia and, on the weekend. So you can very easily get great advice. And the other thing I love too is people on the internet, whether it's talking about property or whether it's talking about success or business, I often wonder how many of those people have actually had a successful business or have a successful property portfolio, or quite frankly, barely rubbing 2 cents together, just enough to be able to put their internet program together.
I'd agree with you there. So you asked me what the traits of successful people are, successful investors are. And I think another one is that they, as we said, evaluate their success in business, the business of investing, and they admit to their mistakes. They correct them. They're aware of their own failings. They recognise that, hey, that property hasn't performed like I expected it to, and they try and work out why. And if it doesn't work, they're prepared to sell up and start again. Not sell up everything, but they recognise holding an underperforming asset is going to hold them back from achieving their goals. But they don't blame others. They take full responsibility for the results they've got. That's one of the big traits of successful people. They aren't victims. While actually, Mark, I don't even know any rich victims.
No. Michael, I was just having a conversation with a client earlier, a mutual client, and he was sort of saying, I've just made this terrible mistake. But then we very quickly moved into, but, I've made this mistake, but I've learned from it. So can you now help me to take that learning and apply it into the next phase of my business? So absolutely didn't blame anybody, blamed himself entirely, admitted to the mistake, but now how can I pick this up and use it as a learning process?
And maybe the last trait of successful people I think I'd like to discuss at the moment, Mark, is that they actually enjoy the journey. They appreciate it. They're grateful, because if you're not grateful, you won't be wealthy. So they enjoy the journey, because if you don't, you're not going to enjoy the destination when you get there.
No, they celebrate the success along the way, don't they? I know it's one of the things that, we do that in Mastermind all the time. We every month we talk to people what have been the successes they've had. I guess, Michael, the interesting thing and the similarities here with property and business is that, as I see it, many people call the fortuitous alignment of preparation and opportunity luck. So somebody's done an enormous amount of preparation. They've created the opportunity, and others will look at that as luck. And I guess if that's what you call luck, then successful property investors and successful business people really are lucky, aren't they?
Yes, Mark. So clearly luck, or getting lucky, is a common thread among success. At some point, those who became wealthy got lucky. Without luck, I guess success is impossible. But Mark, in your mind, is there a formula to becoming lucky?
Well, I think there is, and I guess the only formula that works is the formula that actually helps you to create good luck. I mean, in my mind, creating good luck boils down to doing specific things that increase your chances for luck to occur. And I sort of put together a bit of a 6-step process, Michael, that I'd like to share with you.
Sure.
So I think the step one, you said before, you've got to have a dream. So step number one is to actually have and pursue a dream. Step number 2 is to then create specific goals around the dream. Because if we don't create the goals, it remains a dream. We never actually put it into action. So we've actually got to put some solid goals around the dream. Once we've got those two in place, then I think the next step is to actually define the goals. So work them out step by step. What are the things that I need to achieve in order to actually realize that dream? Identify what they are, lay them out, and be really clear about what those steps are. And then this is the big thing, because right up until this point in time, these first 3 steps, it's still at this stage, it's still a bit of a dream. It's got some goals attached to it, but there's no activity attached to it. You've actually got to take repetitive daily action around each individual goal. If you do that, then eventually those actions will become habits. Habits will then create the outcomes. And I think that's what was often referred to as persistence, Michael, isn't it?
Sure, that's right.
Once we've got that in place, kind of gets a bit simple from there, because you engage in those daily habits forever, by the way, and then wait for that lucky break. So
I think that's one of the big bits. People aren't persistent enough. They don't wait long enough. It doesn't work, so they swap to something else. They look for the next shiny toy.
Yeah, that was one of the big things that I was afraid of for people in business during COVID, Michael. There was, if you remember at the beginning of COVID, there was an awful lot of talk about pivot. You have to pivot. And my fear, I hated the word pivot, because my fear was, don't suddenly go and change everything you've been doing well for the last 10 or 15 or whatever number of years it's been. You've got to engage in those daily habits, and you'll ride out the various storms that come along. And there's always going to be some kind of a storm. I mean, there was the GFC, there's COVID, these things will come along. But
they definitely will.
But I think none of the success formulas in the world will produce success unless the formula provides with a specific action step that you need to take to create the luck. And Michael, I know that's what you wrote a lot about, habits.
Sure. So you actually got to keep doing it till it becomes a habit, till it becomes unconscious. How do you stop yourself from straying? That's the hard bit, because the habits really, they're just repetitive actions, thinking, emotions, decisions. And because they're repetitive, good daily habits mathematically increase the opportunity to find luck. They actually compound on each other. They eventually automate your persistence. They help you create luck. But if you're having difficulty and you fall off the wagon, so to speak, I guess that's why you have a personal trainer to make you go to the gym. That's why you have a property strategist to help you not get sidetracked. And that's why you need a business mentor and coach also, isn't it, Mark? So maybe it's not a bad time for you to explain how you use all these things that we've spoken about to help clients for Business Accelerator Mastermind.
Well, Michael, what we do is we work with service business owners and professionals in private practice who find that they've got a successful business which is simply far too reliant on them. So we get to understand what's the highest and best use of their time. We get to understand who are the people they most need around them. And then we help them to set those exact, precise targets, and then use the time and the team and the process in order to achieve them.
So if you want to find out more about Business Accelerator Mastermind and have the same business coach that I have, why not go to metropolemastermind.com.au, find out about what Mark and his team do. And I'm involved in that too, nowhere near as big way as Mark or the rest of the team are, but why not make the next year the best year of your life? And if you're a small business owner or a professional, metropolemastermind.com.au. Mark, in summary, I guess the bottom line really is, like it or not, luck does play an outsized role in success. There's a lot more to it than that, isn't there? But the right response isn't to pretend somehow you can outwit it or outwork the reality that, though it's part of it, you can't just sit on the couch and hope luck's going to come to you. You've actually got to do things to become lucky, increase your odds of hitting the success jackpot. And part of it's by developing rich habits. So going right back to the beginning, Marta, thank you for giving us the inspiration to have this chat. And I suggest you do read the book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, and learn from those very many successful people. And Mark, it's actually based on Tom's 3-year study of successful wealthy people and average Americans, and based on the 3,000 people that I've mentored over the years.
And it's a great read, Michael. People often ask me, those who have read your property books, for example, and say, what's the next book I should read? And it is Rich Habits, Poor Habits that I always suggest, because I've read it and it is a great read, and it just reminds you of the importance of those daily practices, that building habits.
Well, if you're wondering where to get it, I'll leave a link in the show notes, but richhabitspoorhabits.com. And Mark, I'm really, really proud. It's been translated into 5 languages. And just recently, some Russian publishers have taken it on, even given us an advance. So it's going to be translated to another language. So these principles of success habits, of rich habits, are universal.
So, Michael, does that mean they'll be Russian to read it?
That's right. Well, it's interesting. The most successful country it's been in is actually Taiwan, the Chinese version of it, where last year alone there were 38,000 copies sold in that small country. So I hope China doesn't invade it, because I enjoy getting my royalties.
I think we all hope that.
Okay, well, Mark, as always, it's been fun talking, and it's interesting. It's no longer a surprise to me how much your thoughts on business and mine on property meld.
Yeah, very much so, Michael. There's so much similarity, isn't there, between running a business? As you say, you should run your property investment as a business.
Well, actually, maybe we should be a bit more clear on that. There's very great similarities between those who get it right, because most property investors don't. They never get past their first or second property. And unfortunately, most small businesses don't either. We hear about the failure rate the whole time.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is very true.
Okay, well, I look forward to catching up with you again real soon to have our regular chats.
Look forward to it, Michael.
Well, we spoke a lot about luck and a whole lot of other areas that you can concentrate on if you want to become successful in whatever area of your life we're talking about. So this Michael Yardney podcast is really not just about property investment, but about success and money and achieving what you want in life. And if you've got some hints at pointing you in the right direction, and you know somebody else who'd benefit from that as well, please do me a favour. Do them a favour and tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. Please just tell one person about it. Of course, you can tell the world by just leaving a review on wherever you're listening to this. Every podcast app has got a share button, or just do it the old-fashioned way and tell them about what you got out of this show. Now, I'll be back again twice a week, but in the meantime, you can catch me on social media. Just look for Michael Yardney, or join my private Facebook group. Look for the Property Update private Facebook group. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?